Lay audiences to Gelugpa masquerade dance performances have been drawn to the character of a white old man who, in the role of jester or buffoon, brings comic relief to an otherwise solemn ritual. In the 20th century, scholars assumed that given his prominence and appeal, the white old man belonged to the dance's prototype in Tibet. Rene Nebesky-Oykowicz, however, dispelled this notion by pointing out that the character is neither attested in the Fifth Dalai Lama's 1647 manual promulgating the dance, is this okay, nor found in its multifarious Tibetan versions, but entered the Tibetan New Year masquerade at Namgyal Monastery only after the turn of the 20th century, when he was introduced by word of the 13th Dalai Lama as a result of a dream vision he had had during a period of exile in Mongolia. So in Mongolian tradition, a deity, Tsagaan Ovgen, the white old man, is widely known and well venerated. In addition to masquerade dance, the cult is attested in written sources, oral tradition, painting, and plastic arts. References to him are found across a wide variety of Mongolian Buddhist literature, and a liturgy consisting of incense offerings and prayers exists significantly in Mongolian language dedicated to him specifically. An aim of this liturgy is to apologize for Tsagaan Ovgen's non-Buddhist origin by offering an account of his conversion. In a short text titled Tsagaan Ovgni Sodar, the White Old Man's Sutra, Buddha happens upon Tsagaan Ovgen at his mountain residence called Jimste Oi, the fruited forest. Buddha asks him, "Why do you live upon this mountain in solitude?" In reply, Tsagaan Ovgen enumerates his multifarious deific functions. These include ruling as a genie over the creatures of water and earth and judging the good and bad deeds of men. Because his deeds are beneficent and in accordance with the Dharma, Buddha acquiesces and he is assimilated. Yet despite apology, clergy denigrate Tsagaan Ovgen, labeling him a lay deity of the Mongols' Karashashin, a term faithfully translated secular authority, but which scholars consistently equate with shamanism. Taking him for an indigenous shamanic deity, scholars represent Tsagaan Ovgen as a manifestation of archaic belief in nature. The representation has influenced to some extent how Mongols themselves perceive Tsagaan Ovgen in modern times. Be this as it may, this representation has distorted and obscured Tsagaan Ovgen's scientific and historical reality. The shamanistic interpretation's assumption that Tsagaan Ovgen manifests archaic belief in nature is contravened by sources' consistent rhetoric to show that nothing of Tsagaan Ovgen's being is natural. Sources explicitly represent him as a supernatural force with power over nature to control it. Moreover, Mongols historically do not worship nature. In pre-Buddhist Mongolian culture, nature is self-existent. There is nothing to There is nothing to believe in it, in that in and of itself it is void, absent of orientation in space and time, one and undifferentiated, turning and turning. And indeed in need of a governing agent, the likes of Genghis Khan, to impose order upon it. Since, ineluctably, this order comes from heaven, it is heaven and not nature that the Mongols venerate. When one looks to heaven for an analog to the Mongols' Tsagaan Ovgen, one finds it readily enough, provided one knows the particular vault under which to look. To the extent that they have been sovereign, throughout their history the Mongols' heaven, Tingir, has been their own. Even so, Mongol sovereigns have appropriated much from the heavens of their predecessors. In particular, they have incorporated allegories of Chinese Tian. Here in the Chinese sky, one finds a star, the allegory to which corresponds to that of Tsagaan Ovgen. Known in the West as Canopus, in Chinese allegory it is Laoren, the old man. So after Sirius, Canopus is the second brightest fixed star up in the sky. Of a brilliant white hue, it shines prominently near the solstitial collier in the southern sky. Itself positioned at approximately 53 degrees south latitude, for observers stationed beyond 37 degrees north latitude, it remains ever invisible below the Earth's horizon. For people near the 37th parallel, it is only ever but barely visible, peeping over the southern horizon, and then only for a brief duration, and only in the best of weather. People in the northern hemisphere who were able to see it used it for navigation. taking it for their guide to the south. In Chinese tradition, the star's allegory is attested by the Han Dynasty. In the astronomical section of the Jinshu, Laoren stands south of Hu, the bow, and is also known as Nanji, extreme south, or southern march. Allegory of Canopus derived relative to a point of observation from the ancient capital, Chang'an. Situated between 34 and 35 degrees north latitude, there the royal court could witness Canopus's heliacal rising in late September around the autumnal equinox, its culmination at midnight around the winter solstice, and its heliacal setting around the vernal equinox in late March, after which time it would remain hidden below the Earth's horizon during spring and summer seasons. From Chang'an, the star made a very low and rapid transit through the sky, passing quickly just over the horizon, grazing the tops of the Zhongshan Mountains to the south. Being the most southern prominently viewable star, Canopus gave observers their best bearing on true south. To see the short arc of its transit in cosmic terms relative to the increasingly broader arcs of stars above was to see the universe funneling down toward the celestial equator, funneling down from the celestial equator towards its southern extreme or limit. Passing so low to the horizon, clouds, mist, haze, smoke, or dust frequently obscured the star. When Canopus could be seen, the occasion was deemed highly auspicious for intelligible reasons. Directly seeing Canopus was a sign of calm, clear atmosphere and good weather. Conceptually, seeing Canopus enabled one to judge the state of world order. This is because, being the star that marked the South Pole, seeing Canopus made it possible to envision the axis mundi. Whereas the star that marked the North Pole at the other end of this axis was observable every night, all night, Canopus could be viewed only for about half the year, then only occasionally, and when it was observable, moved through the sky very quickly, in a matter of a few hours. When seen, however, in illuminating the axis mundi, it enabled one to envision the metaphysical firmament separate the sky with its lines of reticulation, Jing, warp, longitude, which passed through the pole, and Wei, woof, latitude, which circled the pole, and the stars affixed to this framework covering the sky, such that the dome of heaven above looked like a marvelous star-spangled canopy. When one saw Canopus appear, as if out of nowhere, at its predetermined place at the autumnal equinox, one could behold the heavenly host that shone overhead at rest. Then, and this is nice to think about, then as Canopus made its short, swift transit across the sky, one could see the vast, expansive, sparkling canopy of heaven twirling with it, as if Canopus were the turning handle of a parasol. Moreover, with its heliacal setting occurring on or around the vernal equinox, the star foretold the renewal of cosmic order with the coming of spring and the rising of the auspicious Cyan dragon. So for reifying the perpetuation of world order, Canopus was also known as Shoshing, the longevity star. In symmetry, the longevity Canopus signified for the order to heaven. It also signified for the government on earth. Proclamation stated that when Canopus shines, the emperor is secure and glorious in longevity. However, if Canopus were obscured, the presage was for armed conflict. Given the star's political import, allegory of Canopus was disseminated through various modes, media, and vehicles of propaganda, and spread to neighboring peoples with whom Chinese dynasties had political, cultural, and economic ties. Through Taoism in particular, but also Buddhism, Chinese allegory of Canopus spread to Korea and here, Japan. So Buddhists, of course, knew Chinese allegory of Canopus. In 724, on behalf of the Tang emperor, the renowned astronomer and polymath, the Buddhist monk Yixing, led an expedition southward by sea expressly to observe Canopus at higher altitude. Among the Gelugpa, sages knew the allegory through the legacy of Chinese Buddhism in Tibet, but they also knew it through the ongoing assimilation of Chinese astral science. So although Tibetans clearly knew Chinese allegory of Canopus, the cult of the white old man appears not to have been especially prominent in central Tibet. This apparent lack of recognition appears not to be due to lack of reverence for Canopus, however. At 29 degrees north latitude, residents of Lhasa have a fair look at the star, unless the mountains block it, I don't know. Anyway, rather it appears to be due to reverence for an alternate allegory. Tibetan astral science is wittingly comprised syncretistically of both Indian and Chinese traditions. Of these two, Tibetans afford the Indian primacy, and so tend to privilege Canopus's Indian allegory over the Chinese. In India, Canopus is known as Agastya. Traditionally, Indian astronomers aligned the calendar with the heliacal rising of Canopus, which was to occur on the 7th day of the second half of Bhadra, August-September, a rainy season in India. The word Agastya denotes at once the star Canopus and a certain Indian rishi, one of 7 inspired sages said to have authored the Vedas. As Canopus itself, Agastya is said to be the cleanser of water, because turbid waters settle and become clear when it appears. In this allegory, the appearance of Canopus perhaps indicates the season when summer runoff from the Himalayas subsides. In central Tibet, the designation Karma Rishi, Rishi star for Canopus, is in keeping with Indian allegory. In worship of this allegory, Tibetans hold an annual water festival of thanksgiving in conjunction with Canopus's heliacal rising around the autumnal equinox. From the star's reappearance in the early dawn, Tibetans receive karchu, star water. Star water means pure water. It manifests specifically in the season when turbid water becomes clear and potable. Thereafter, it refers also to the daily fall of morning dew. And that's an old type, goes back to Egypt. Tibetans personify the star as an ascetic saint who lives alone for long periods of time in meditation. When he appears, they go together joyfully to lakes and rivers to fetch water. Monks go in procession and make offerings. Under a Canopus personified as healer, Tibetans practice balneotherapy, that is, they bathe for health benefits. As ruling elite, Mongols knew Chinese allegory of Canopus intimately. Not only was the allegory's mythos familiar, they were privy to its esoteric logos as well. The mythos to Canopus allegory Mongols might have known through forms of propaganda disseminated in various media, for instance, in theater. Mongols witnessed the golden age of Chinese drama in the Zaju plays of the Yuan dynasty and continued to follow the theater thereafter in the Qing. These dramas are composed as astral allegories. To read them with a mind for Chinese Tianwen, one sees that they are steeped in references to celestial phenomena derived by and large from Taoist astral science. Writers drew from a stable of stock characters, one of whom is the Old Man. His name changes from one drama to another, but his distinctive attributes carry over. He has a white beard and holds a cane, resides in the south, in a garden, at a mountain pass, and often plays a cantankerous fool or half-wit who nonetheless possesses supernatural power and great wisdom. The logos to Chinese allegory of Canopus, Mongols might have known from authorities on astral science, Chinese Tianwen. One example of a source that explicitly reveals the Mongols' esoteric knowledge of the logos of Canopus allegory is the treatise Tingrin Otig, the Explication of Heaven. This treatise covers a Kangxi-era Jesuit-made systematization of Chinese astral science, which at the time was state-of-the-art. Around 1711, the system was translated into Mongolian from Chinese, and then from Mongolian into Tibetan. In 1715, it was block printed. In one of its star charts, the text renders Canopus Abugenkumunda, old man, the elderly person, and in corresponding commentary states that the star is on the South Pole and that because it exits and enters heaven in every spring and autumn respectively, its age is immortal. It is hard to say when the Mongols may have developed Chinese allegory of Canopus into the uniquely Mongolian cult of Tsagan Ovgan. At the time of Genghis Khan's founding the Mongol Empire in 1206, the Mongols likely knew Canopus, worshipped it in some way, and perhaps even worshipped it in Chinese allegory. Turco-Mongolic aristocratic peoples traditionally worshipped heaven and its prominent stars, including Canopus. No exception to this, Chinggisid Mongols worshipped the heavenly guardians of the four directions, and in literature make references to a white betokening, mountain-dwelling, supernatural wise old man who may well prefigure Tsagan Ovgan. These representations, however, if they do indeed refer to Canopus, share only vague similarity to the specific cult of Tsagan Ovgan in Gelugpa tradition. During the Yuan dynasty, although Mongols certainly knew Chinese allegory of Canopus and venerated it, sources do not indicate the existence of either a uniquely Mongolian or a hybrid Buddhicized cult of Tsagaan Ovgun. As for the latter, even in Kublai Khan's lifetime, Sakya priests had assimilated rituals of the Mongols' imperial tradition into Buddhism. However, while some of these rituals are attested in sources such as Marco Polo's travels, no mention of Tsagaan Ovgun is made. Neither do we find pictorial representations of him as a uniquely Mongolian deity. This absence points to a crucial distinction between Yuan and Gelugpa-era propaganda. As opposed to the Gelugpa Tsagaan Ovgun cult, during the Yuan, propaganda was not aimed at Mongols. Rather, it was directed towards governing China. This crux strongly suggests that the cult of the non-Buddhist deity Tsagaan Ovgun was promulgated under Gelugpa hegemony. The most likely time frame for the promulgation of this cult is the 18th century. During this era, the cult's earliest extant written sources are attested. The era witnessed a rapid florescence of the cult as numerous sources in diverse media, all previously unattested, crop up throughout the Mongolian world. This florescence coincided with a political drive orchestrated under the Qianlong Emperor and seen to by the Jiangjia Hutuktu Roba Dorji to promote unity through new rituals that functioned to inculcate nationalism and loyalty to a Buddhist Qing world order. These trends further coincide with the Mongols' increasing reliance on the New Age Chinese heaven as given by Tingri Notak. Perhaps the Tsagaan Ovgun cult was first promulgated from Mergen Monastery and ordered right-wing banner, Inner Mongolia, by the third Mergen-Gegan Luvsandambijantsan. Evidence for this is rather compelling. The cult's earliest extant sources are attributed to this Mergen-Gegan. The body of various types of Tsagaan Ovgun literature has been shown to have derived almost entirely from his. Also, his creation of Tsagaan Ovgun liturgy is in keeping with other liturgies he created. In those, he converts rituals of indigenous Mongolian culture concerning, for instance, a fire cult, weather magic, cairns, and Chenghis Khan, into Buddhist forms and composes them in the vernacular. For this merit, he is credited not only in Inner Mongolia, but throughout the Mongolian Buddhist world as being the founder of Mongolian Buddhist liturgy. Liturgies in Mongolian, such as that of Tsagaan Ovgun, were not prevalent before him. An anomaly of sorts among types of Tsagaan Ovgun liturgy is a prayer connected with Wu Tai Shan worship. In this liturgy, the white old man becomes an emanation of Manjushri. Embodied as he was by their Manchu emperor, Mongols venerated the Bodhisattva of wisdom in numerous ways. One ritual they kept was a pilgrimage to his abode on Wu Tai Shan. In a 1721 Mongolian guidebook to Manjushri veneration at Wu Tai Shan, promulgated by Roba Dorji, Manjushri is represented in the guise of Chinese Canopus as an old man who appears on the mountain from time to time to impart wisdom. When one assumes that Tsagaan Ovgun is an ancient Mongolian shamanic deity, one naturally sees the old man in this guidebook to be Mongolian and concludes that here we see Tsagaan Ovgun influencing Manjushri. However, when one sees him as the personification of Chinese allegory of Canopus, then it would seem instead that we are seeing the engendering of Tsagaan Ovgun through Manjushri. Though, if not creating Tsagaan Ovgun proper, this 1721 guidebook to Wu Tai Shan worship perhaps sows seeds for the cult which will come to fruition some years later. So in the latter half of the 18th century, the cult of Tsagaan Ovgun develops in Mongolian realms, in the Mongol realms, and spreads throughout the Gelugpa world. Regardless of whether Mergen-Gegan founded the cult or not, his liturgy became central to the cult's dissemination. H. Futaki suggests that the cult was adapted from the clergy by the laity, and he traces its spread throughout Inner Mongolia to Khalkha, Oirats, Buryats, so on. From Beijing, he finds that Mergen-Gegan's incense offering was translated into Tibetan by a Chachar Mongolian monk, Lobsan Sultam, as Sada Gampo Karpoi Sangjuk, incense offering for the genie, white old man. At some point in time, the white old man cult became popular in Amdo and other areas in Tibet among Tibetans who knew it as a Mongolian influence. To conceive of the white old man synoptically as a singular composite Gelugpa deity, choosing as a point of reference the opening decades of the 20th century when his cult was most prevalent, one finds him an amorphous entity. His character has been strongly influenced by Mongolian cults. Oh, I think I missed something. That's him down at the bottom. There is Tsagaan Ovgen in this Tingrin Otik. And we'll see more of this later. I'm sorry I missed that one. Anyway, to conceive of Tsagaan Ovgen, or the white old man, synoptically as a singular composite Gelugpa deity, choosing as a point of reference the opening decades of the 20th century when his cult was most prevalent, one finds him an amorphous entity. His character has been strongly influenced by Mongolian cults of Tsagaan Ovgen. However, his makeup is not limited to Mongolian influence. He has supplanted or mixed with pre-existing forms. By and large, his prototype is Shosheng, that is, Chinese allegory of Canopus. This is not to say that his prior incarnations were not influenced by allegories of Canopus in other traditions, such as the Indian, Turkic, or Iranian. Although his essential features are rather consistent, the extent of his attributes vary, sometimes considerably. His being is in a perpetual state of flux, and he morphs with other forms. Among the Bayad Mongols, after a destructive earthquake in 1905, he morphs with Indian allegory of Canopus, when in the local masquerade, his dance is altered to express the calming of waves in still water. Interestingly, another metamorphosis of the Gelugpa white old man is into Christian Santa Claus. As noted by Poznev and others, Buryats associate Tsagaan Ovgen with Greek Orthodox Saint Nicholas. So both are old men with white hair and white kaftan, both have big bellies and a jovial character, both carry a staff. Poznev has readers believe that the association between the two is merely coincidental. However, one thing he overlooks that Buryats may not have is the white old man and Saint Nicholas's mutual bond in heaven. Both abide on the axis mundi, one on the South Pole, the other the North. As attested in Arab tradition, Canopus was aligned with the star Alcor of Ursa Major, and this is in Chinese tradition too, occupying respectively the highest and lowest posts in the celestial hierarchy. For Northern Europeans, this star, together with three other stars of Ursa Major, formed Odin's wain. For Christians who appropriated the pagan cult of Odin, this became St. Nicholas's sleigh. In this bond between them, should the staffs they hold both represent the axis mundi, the two might well be holding on to the same thing. So in the face of this amorphousness, verification that the greater Gelugpa white old man derives from Chinese allegory of Canopus lies in recognition that the preponderance of attributes correlate with Chinese allegory of Canopus. They do so from one emanation to the next, and no matter how disparate the sets of attributes may be. This correlation is evidenced not only by correspondence with the uniquely Chinese mythos of Canopus, by which the relationship might be merely coincidental, but also by correspondence with the uniquely Chinese logos of Canopus, by which the correspondence is spatial and temporal and comprehensible in scientific and historical terms. So as for the white old man's whiteness and old age, in Chinese allegory, Canopus is white and an old man, of course. As for dwelling on a mountain and wielding a bow and arrow, in Chinese allegory, Canopus dwells on a sacred mountain, and directly overhead is the bow and arrow constellation Hushi. He moves, his movement, this mound-like move, that's this kind of sacred. Anyway, I can't get into it. But anyway, yeah. So the white old man lives on a fruited mountain, lush with produce, fruit, sometimes vegetables, sometimes peaches. In Chinese allegory, Canopus is depicted in such a setting, and in the sky resides near to the constellation Tianyuan, the celestial garden, which Sima Qian says represents an orchard with peach, apricot, and cassia trees, and is said to be the place where old man Canopus grows his herbs of longevity. The old man is down there. The garden is over there. Yeah. So the white old man wields a dragon-headed staff. In Chinese allegory, Canopus wields the same. In the sky it resides next to the staff-like axis mundi, and at its heliacal setting heralds the rising of the blue dragon of spring, which marks the beginning or head of the year. Both the white old man and Chinese allegory of canopus ensure longevity, both instill wisdom. In Mongolian masquerade, the white old man is humiliated and ridiculed. Scholars state that this debasement represents hatred for Chinese. If Mongolian audiences did indeed interpret the scene in this way, perhaps the financial burden brought on by Chinese usury practices had something to do with it. However, in Yuan Zaju drama, the old man character was also bullied. The prototype for the scene was understood to be the figure of Han Xin in Sima Qian's Shiji. The scene is meant to exemplify how humility and self-discipline bode future greatness. The identification is further corroborated in other ways. In his iconography and painting and plastic arts, the white old man's representations as an old man with white hair and robe, a bulbous bald pate, holding a dragon-headed staff accompanied by deer and crane, and seated in a bucolic setting under peach trees, match those of Chinese shoshing, that is canopus, more or less exactly. Mongols themselves identify their white old man with the Chinese longevity star. That's him, they say. So even modern scholars recognize that the Gelugpa white old man cannot but be related to Chinese shoshing. What scholarship has heretofore failed to do is go so far as to identify the Gelugpa white old man specifically with the celestial body canopus. In this oversight, they deny him his reality in space and time. And what good is a god if it doesn't exist in space and time, So, as for what reality the white old man conveys, among those in the Gelugpa fold, one perceives distinctions between how he might have been perceived by the different factions who knew him, the progenitors who made his myths, the common people who took those myths on faith, Mongols who so revered him, the Tibetan clergy in Mongolia who denigrated him, Tibetans in Amdo who saw him as Mongolian, and so on. Factors that may have impacted how he was apprehended can be identified. For Mongols venerating him in Inner and Outer Mongolia, canopus was invisible. They could not see the white old man dwelling atop his sacred mountain. They could not see him still the waters. In ceremonies, they would sometimes venerate his icon. One might ask if Mongols on pilgrimage to Wutaishan went there to view canopus. Among the elite, observance of the star itself may have been important for various rituals and propaganda, but in terms of keeping time and space, reliance on mathematical models had long made the actual sighting of canopus perfunctory. Also, the times in which the white old man emanates in texts do not appear to depend upon the observation of canopus. These factors suggest that lay commoners were given to apprehend the white old man in largely abstract terms. Today, questions of the white old man's reality loom larger than ever. One can argue that the invention of shamanism has changed his essential being. Certainly foreign scholars and indigenous peoples, such as the Mongols themselves, have taken to seeing him in anthropological terms. One can argue that communist ideology erased pre-modern conceptions of the white old man, and one might argue that present-day conceptions of the white old man are given by wholly different apprehensions. And that's it. Happy to welcome our first speaker for this afternoon panel. We have from Warsaw, Agata Bareja-Starzynska. How do I say? Starzynska, yeah. And she'll be talking to us on the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba Zanabadzar, the Khalkha Zaya Pandita, Loam Prinle, and Lama Gegen's reverential prayers and their significance. Please welcome Agata.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers. It's really, I'm very honored to be here and to be able to show some results of my work. And I think it will be very, well, so far it has been a very interesting meeting, and I hope it will also continue like that, and it will give us many new thoughts, ideas, and inspiration in our work. So in this way, I think it will really fulfill its preliminaries or duties that, or the aim why it was organized. I would like to show you some books. which I would like to donate to the library. So I will just now show them around. You can have a look, and later on I suppose I shall give it to Jacob or Brian to give to the library. And the first one is very much connected with the topic that I will be speaking about today. And the others you will have a look. One is on Tibetan collection that is in the Jagiellonian University in Krakow in Poland. This is done by my colleague, Tupten Kungachashap. And the third one is about materials that are in the archives in Krakow also. And this is from the expedition of Polish Mongolist Władysław Kotwicz to Mongolia in 1912. And, well, you will have to see. I cannot take time for this now. So just if you can show them around. The topic is on reverential prayers, but I will have to go quickly also through biographies. But first, what I'm interested in is what I call Mongolian Buddhist networking. So it's something that I would like to work on. And what I'm presenting now, it's really very preliminary and it's a starting point, but nevertheless, I would like to know your feedback, and maybe it will help me also in my work. And when we speak about place of Buddhist teachers within, I call here Tibeto-Mongolian Buddhism, we have to look at line of transmission, Jutrim, and this means that we look into teachings and empowerments which Mongolian incarnations have received and which they were able to transmit to their disciples, and all other Buddhist achievements such as written works, foundation of monasteries, plus activities of their disciples. So all this build up of this Buddhist networking. However, I would like to show you also that we have another aspect, which is a claimed authority and succession. And about this aspect we can learn from reverential prayers, which include lists of previous incarnations, or it is also called as pre-existences. And we know that incarnation lineages go back to the times of the Buddha, and it is in the so-called reverential prayers, Suldep. The successive incarnations are listed, first in India and later in Tibet. It is not so that we have such lists for all incarnations. They appear during the time, usually after the passing by of a teacher. After some time, such reverential prayers appear, and they then include such lists. And this set of names, which constitutes each list, places a given master in a particular Buddhist context, showing his connections and potentials. So then it links those incarnations with the whole Buddhism realm, not only with their actual activity on the spot. And so we move to Mongolia, mainly to Mongolian Republic. However, as you can see on the map, and it will, as a little bit will appear also from the presentation, we have to consider in the Mongolia as well, so all the Mongolian lands. But first, the most important is that we go to Khalkha, Mongolia, to the heart of what is now Mongolian Republic. So the three masters about whom I would like to speak about are very well known to all who work on Buddhism in Mongolia. So first Khalkha Jebtsundamba or Zanabazar, Lamen Gegen, if we look chronologically, and Khalkha Zaya Pandita. And they were the most influential Gelugpa teachers in Mongolia in the 17th, 18th centuries. I would like to say that and stress that for me they are really the founders of the Gelugpa Buddhism in Mongolia. So if we would like to know something about Buddhism in Mongolia, we have to examine, we have to study them. Also, very interesting point is that one of the Gelugpa Tibetan hierarchs, the third Kedup, or Bensa Tulku, the third incarnation, was involved in their recognition, all of these three masters, and probably he had plans for them and how Gelugpa should be shaped in Mongolia. But he died in 1644, so very soon after this recognitions. So we would not be able to know his plans, but it seems that there was some kind of plan for them. And now the activity of these three important masters does not stop in Mongolia in the Khalkha lands, but it goes further to the south, to Inner Mongolia. It was caused not because of their interest, but because of the political situation, because of the fact that due to the war between Oirats and Khalkha, Galdan Boshukto invaded Khalkha lands and they had to flee. So they went to Inner Mongolia, but because of this event, in a way they built the link between the activity of them in Khalkha and also in Inner Mongolia, and we have traces of their activity in Inner Mongolia as well. Among those three, of course, the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba or Zanabazar was the most important. Because, as we know from history, he became the most important, the most influential because of his, let's say, political activity or activity which became political during the course of time. Although I believe that he was himself interested only in religion, but the circumstances were different. He was the son of a Khan, and it's also very important. His possibilities to pursue his studies, and then his religious activity was different from just a common monk. And however, all these three figures were very important for Buddhism in Mongolia. So also this incarnation is known either as the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba through his title, or his Mongolian title Undurgegen, or his name Zanabazar, which comes from Dnyana Vajra, so it's actually the Mongolian pronunciation of a Sanskrit name. And we have sources in Tibetan which were written by Mongols in Tibetan language. The most important, I think, is the first one, which is the biography included in the work of the Khalkha Zaya Pandita. And it's biography written by Zanabazar's disciple during his lifetime. So it is, in a way, the most reliable source. All the others were based on it. And we have also a Mongolian biography that was written, somewhere in the 18th century, and which includes mainly, I would say, legends about Zanabazar. However, they are also quite important, but not really for what I'm going to say today. And we have also it exists. It's several manuscripts which differ among each other, but these differences are not so huge. And we have also another kind of stories about the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba, but these are actually based on Soldap, and these are stories about his previous incarnations. So it's also interesting, but from another point of view. Now we see the birthplace of Zanabazar, and we see really the vast land, because his father was an important Khalkha Khan. So he was a local ruler. However, he had thousands of herds, and we can see this very huge area, which was a place where he camped and where Zanabazar was born, and today we have a small temple on the spot. And very early, when he was a small boy, he was regarded as the reincarnation, and he was enthroned in a place nearby, which is called the White Lake of his enthronement, because it's Shiret Tsagan Nur. Later, in some interpretation of Mongolian sources, it was believed, or it was written, that he was enthroned as a leader of Mongolian Buddhism. Nothing like that happened at that time. He was just enthroned as an incarnation. We have something like enthronement of every incarnation. Now, the problem is whose reincarnation he was. And here the problem appears because he was regarded as the reincarnation of the Jonangpa master, Taranatha, who was a very important Buddhist scholar from Tibet. As I said, the Bensa Tulku was involved in recognition and sanctioning his recognition. Although in later biography it is said that it was based on the prophecy made from the sutra, and there the name of Krishnacharya appeared. And since Taranatha was his reincarnation, so it was believed that he was Taranatha's incarnation. But since this story is much later, it could have been also made up later. Anyway, in the contemporary biography written by the Khalkha Jebtsundamba Pandita, we do not have this statement. We have information that he was regarded as reincarnation of Lord Taranatha, that it was confirmed by the first or fourth Panchen Lama. But we know that in the writings of the Gelugpa scholars, both the fifth Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama, he is mentioned only by his another claimed incarnation, that he was the reincarnation of Jamyang Choje. So he was called by the name Jamyang Choje, which referred to the fact that he was regarded by the Gelugpas as a reincarnation of Jamyang Choje, who was the founder of Drepung. Sorry, he was called Jamyang Tulku, so reincarnation of Jamyang, and this Jamyang was referring to Jamyang Choje. So it was explained not by me, but also by Tibetologist Stearns, that probably it was useful for the Gelugpas to have this reincarnation of Taranatha and Jamyang Tulku in Mongolia, and through this to be able to claim monasteries that were previously owned by Jonangpa, by Taranatha, and now were not needed for the reincarnation who lived in Mongolia. Well, in any way, we have the situation like that he was regarded as the reincarnation of both Jonangpa and Gelugpa scholar. When he was 15 years old, he went to Tibet, not for really very long time. He spent in Tibet some 1 year and a half, and most of his time he spent actually in Tashilhunpo, although he visited all important places for the Gelugpas, not Jonangpa, but always the Gelugpas. And the most influential for his development, spiritual and teachings, was the Panchen Lama. I also believe that he was important for his interest in art, because it was at the Tashilhunpo monastery workshop where he could have become familiar with Nepalese artisans and all the metallurgical work that they were doing, and for which he became very famous when he went back to Mongolia. And again, we have in biography also statement about sending with him 50 religious specialists to help him to establish proper Gelugpa teachings in Mongolia, and including artists. So this is one of the hints. I will not speak about arts. We have better specialists, Patricia Berger, Uranchimek Sultan. They wrote many interesting, wonderful things about his art. But for the Mongols, he became also responsible for including some Mongolian elements into Buddhism, such as Mongolian styled robes. We will not find it in the text, but it is believed that it started with him. He was responsible for creation of two scripts. One is called square script, Zanabazar square script, and another one is Soyombo, and Soyombo is very important for the symbol that is placed in a Mongolian flag even today. He was also responsible for the place where first location of Urga and Ulaanbaatar is believed that it was there. So in many aspects, his activity became very important for further development of both Mongolian political and religious history, and his relics were placed in Amarbayas Galant Monastery in the Selenge Aimak with the help of the Manchu emperor, who was also his disciple. Now, about his disciples, in the biography we have a statement that he had some 2,000 disciples, including Manchu Emperor Kanchi and Khans of Khalkha, and other disciples are cited. There is a list of them, and in red color I marked the other two masters connected with him. One of them is called as incarnation of great accomplished Lektsog Ulhundrup. It is another name for Lamen Gegen, and we will see it. And the second one is incarnation of Ujin Noyon. This refers to Khalkha Zaya Pandita himself. He wrote it. He did not put his name there, but he referred to himself by this name, connecting him to his previous incarnation. And of course, this person was very important also for the further development, not only of religious, but also for the political history, because the 8th Jebtsundamba became the last Khan of Mongolia in 1911. And here I put one of the pictures that you can see also in this black book that I distributed, because these old nice pictures are included in the volume. The 9th Jebtsundamba was born in Tibet, and what I would like to point to is that with the development of democratic changes in Mongolia, his recognition was confirmed by the Dalai Lama. Then he was also enthroned as the spiritual head of the Jonangpa school. But when he went to Mongolia for the first time in 2009, then in 2010 until his passing away, he was active mainly as a Gelugpa teacher. So we still have those two affiliations connected with the Jebtsundampas, and we don't know what is going to happen with the 10th incarnation, who is already recognized by the Dalai Lama but not announced yet. So we will see whether the 10th incarnation will be also involved in two affiliations or just one. We will see. But now going to the subject, so the pre-existences, we have different lists. And it also happens with not only with him, but with quite many incarnations, that the lists are a little bit different, or even sometimes completely different. But as I said before, those lists are supposed to build up the environment and give some hints what the incarnation can do with reference to the previous incarnations. And here we may see, as I said, Krishnacharya, so yogi who was also visible in the this list of previous incarnations of Taranatha. But we can see also Jamyang Choje, the founder of the Drepung monastery, so the Gelugpa master. Then we see like Kunga, Drolchok, Gaje Satyong. Those are really incarnations that refer to Taranatha. So after Taranatha we have Zanabazar, or we have the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba. So previous incarnations as they are put in the list is Taranatha and his subsequent, or his previous two incarnations, but we have also this Gelugpa incarnation, the most important for the Gelugpas mentioned there. Those are three different Soldep which are more or less the same. We have also a list by London Lama, who is a little bit different. The list is a little bit different, and we can see there is no Krishnacharya. Instead, there is Mikyo Dorje, who was important for the Kalachakra Tantra. And he was also regarded as important first person for Shentong, so it would be important for stressing Jonangpa lineage. But we have Jamyang Churje there, and we have, as in the previous lists, we have Taranatha, we have his two previous incarnations mentioned there. So this list of previous incarnations confirms these two affiliations of the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba. We have this confirmation in Soldep, in reverential prayers that were composed for him. Now we go to the second incarnation, Khalkha Zaya Pandita, whose Tibetan name was Losang Chinle. Mongols pronounce it as Luvsandambijantsan, and he had the title of Jaya, so victorious, the Sanskrit title, which was pronounced as Zaya by the Mongols, and the title was given before to another master, Oirat Zaya Pandita. It's very much confusing for both Mongolists and Tibetologists, and even Pozniev, Haisik, sometimes they were confused which Zaya Pandita appeared in certain sources. So we will see that there was also a little bit of connection between them. And the sources for Khalkha Zaya Pandita's life is his autobiography, short biography by his disciple, and also some data are included in his main work, which is his records of teachings received in 4 volumes. And what is interesting to observe is, and I'm stressing this, is his connection with the Chinggisid line. In several secondary sources, works, studies that were written in the 20th, 21st century, we can read that he was born to Chinggisid lineage, line, golden lineage. It is not true if we read his autobiography. He says that he was the reincarnation, he was Kukye, he was a rebirth of a person who belonged to the Chinggisid line. So he was a commoner, he was not belonging, he was not a nobleman when he was born. But Hundlun Tsukhur, to whom he was referred as his reincarnation, was an important person working for the spread of Buddhism in Khalkha, Mongolia. He was helping Abatai Khan to establish Erdentzu and to establish Buddhism on Khalkha lands. And Zaya Pandita lived in the vicinity of this monastery. And Hundlun Tsukhur was a supporter for Abatai Khan, but he was born as a common boy in a common herder's family, and then when he met, well, he was in a monastery, but sorry, only when he met the Jebtsundamba, he regarded him as the reincarnation of Hundlun Tsukhur, and through this he was made, his position was changed completely. He was treated as a noble monk. His possibilities were started to be completely different, and he writes about it in his autobiography. He received the official position of the reincarnation, Noyon Hutukto, and through this he was able to act in a different way. He was in Mongolia until 18 years, until the age of 18, and only then he was able to go to Tibet. I believe that he went to Tibet with the support of the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba. Because for a common monk, or even the monk who was an incarnation, I don't think it was possible just to make the trip. It was like to go to study in Harvard. Someone has to support financially such an event. But then it was possible, and he spent 19 years in Tibet. So among those three, he was for the longest time in Tibet. And his writings are actually the foundation of Gelugpa tradition in Mongolia. He got his ordination from the 5th Dalai Lama. Also, he was for a long time connected to the 1st or 4th Panchen Lama. He was his disciple, and other great Gelugpa masters. Now, in his work, this Tobik, he wrote that when he met with the 5th Dalai Lama and he got the title of Zaya Pandita, the 5th Dalai Lama told him to follow the example of the Oirat Zaya Pandita, who passed away by that time. So the title was in a way given to another Mongol, because now the title was without an owner in a way. And then he was also told to of course, to spread Dharma in Mongolia, but also to follow the tradition of the Gelugpas and not of the Nyingmas. And it was another thing that was stressed in the text. So his main work are 4 volumes of Tobik, or these teachings received, and actually we have in this 4-volume work some about 300 biographies that are very important for the mainly for the spread of Gelugpa Buddhism in Mongolia. It is not so much read by the Tibetans, but it was the source of knowledge for the Mongols, for the monks. And one of the biographies is the one that I translated from Tibetan into English and published as a book. And one of the achievements of Zaya Pandita was the foundation of a monastery in Arkhangai when he came back to Mongolia. We have, actually, this is the cover of a book that was edited and published with help of Isabel Charlot, so I just put it in here. You can learn more about the monastery from this book. And he had further incarnations, which is also an impact of his work in Mongolia. Usually this incarnation is called Zaya Gegen. And now we go to the previous incarnations. And for this list, I used Soldap, or these reverential prayers that were prepared recently, by Odgon Bayar, by a monk from Ganten Monastery. And what we see here is Ashoka, the ruler in India who had an impact on spread of Buddhism. And it's quite interesting because in a way, in some suldaps that were made for rulers, or like, for example, Desisangi Gyatso, names that appear there claim for being a ruler. So there are different lists of previous incarnations for religious figures, and different for for rulers who can become also incarnations, or who are believed to be reincarnations. So when we see here Ashoka, I think that it has to do with the fact that Khundlun Tsukhur was also from the Han's lineage. So it refers to the fact that there were rulers in the previous incarnations. We can see also Bhutan Rinpoche, the important Tibetan master, included here. But in a way, this list is very strange, because we end here in the 14th century. We have Khundlun Tsukhur, so it could have been several persons between them. So in a way, this list is quite strange, and I will look for others, and I will try to compare them. Tang again is very active in Mongolia. We have also that we can see that he's building a new temple. Now the third incarnation that I would like to speak about is Laming again, also with the Tibetan name, which is given during the ordination, Luvsandambijantsan, and he was known under many titles. Perhaps this person is less known than two others. His biography is short biography is included in Tobik, or this work by the Khalkha Zaya Pandita, and we have also his short versified autobiography. And he was born in Chingis noble family, so similarly to Zanabazar. So his possibilities to go to Tibet, to study and to spread Buddhism were quite big. And again, we have a person of Khundlun Tsukhur mentioned in his biography, because Khundlun Tsukhur's son was father of Laming again. So we can see that they were in a way very closely related. Zaya Pandita, who was the reincarnation of Khundlun Tsukhur, and Laming again, who was the son of Khundlun Tsukhur. Also, I think it's quite significant that he called himself a monk of Chinggis divine descent. So he was referring to the fact that he belonged to Chinggisids. He was 4 years younger than the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba, and he was 3 years elder than the Khalkha Zaya Pandita, who became his disciple. So they were quite interrelated. And there were some prophecies that he will be recognized as reincarnation. And finally, his recognition was confirmed by letter, in a letter by the Panchen Lama. So he started to study medicine and astrology, and when he went to Tibet, finally he studied Kalachakra in Jute College of Tashilhunpo, and he became very important for Mongolian both medical studies and astrological studies and Kalachakra transmission in Mongolia. And again, we have a line of his incarnations that currently, the current incarnation was found. Probably he was also the Kempo or Hambolama of the first Khalkha Jebtsundamba's monastery in Ikura. Regarding him was made by Khalkha Zaya Pandita that he's a reincarnation of Lektsö Klundrup Mahasiddha, but it refers actually to the master who was called Losang Dondrup, who was the founder of Bensa monastery, but his tantric and yogis activity was referred with another name, with this name of Lektsö Klundrup. And when we see the list of Laming against previous incarnations, I marked in red those that appear in different way in different lists. We can see that the previous incarnation, immediate previous incarnation of him was Losang Dondrup, but given this name of Mahasiddha. And the previous incarnations like Shalolekpa, Gyeltsen, Tukjepel, they were also considered as very important tantric masters. So they were all referred, all these incarnations here refer to masters who were tantricists and who were yogi practitioners. But interestingly, we have also name Shridnyana, which may refer to Dipankara Shridnyana Atisha. In the Soldep, where in the stanzas where he is mentioned, it is said that Shridnyana was very important for tantric activities. So that's, well, we know that Atisha also was active as a tantrist, but whether it refers to him, I still would like to double check. Well, so now my conclusions are that we can see that, of course, as I said, those previous incarnations, the list of previous incarnations, they built up the whole setting for the activity of incarnations, but and they connect Mongolian incarnations to masters of India and Tibet. But they can also give some other, they can provide also some other sort of information or data, such as explanations on school affiliation. This is the case of Zanabazar. Claims for nobility, like we have the case of Zaya Pandita, or affirmation of special abilities of Laming again, who would be performing Kala Chakra and who would be responsible actually for foundations of Tibetan Gelugpa medicine and astrology in Mongolia. So these are the conclusions. And one remark regarding Mongolian Buddhism, or shall we call it different kind of Buddhism. What we can see from the biographies is that there are always references to Genghis Khan. I can only say about those three incarnations, but I hope when more work will be done, we can see whether also in other biographies those references are made. This clearly distinguishes Mongolian incarnations from Tibetan incarnations, but on the other hand, it is quite natural that those monks and incarnations of noble origin, they were stressing this in their biographies, that they had this noble origin, connecting them with Genghis Khan and his golden lineage. Other thing that we have that makes Buddhism in Mongolia very much connected to Tibetan Buddhism is, of course, the fact that this is actually Tibetan Buddhism that comes to Mongolia. It's adjusted to the Mongols adapted to their conditions and situation. But one of the factors that make all the monastics very much separate monastics from the lay community is the language, because all the teachings, all the intellectual communication and all the contribution is in Tibetan language, with a few exceptions of Mergen Gegen, maybe Ravja, but all the rest is done in Tibetan language. And I think we have also to remember about that's why to me it is Tibeto-Mongolian Buddhism. So thank you.